So, hello everybody. Good afternoon. Boa tarde. It's a pleasure to welcome you today on behalf of the Ibero-American Institute and the Programa de Pós-Graduação em Ciência Política da Universidade de São Paulo to the 4th session of our online series on developments in Brazil after the 2022 elections. Today we will talk about government and Congress. As you may know, relations between government and Congress have been identified by political scientists as a coalition presidentialism. But Bolsonaro's government followed a different path, initially rejecting to build a broad support among lawmakers, but then reconnecting to the legislative branch. President Lula, who just a few days ago started his third term, will face a Congress where the progressive camp has only about 1/3 of the votes. And of course, one of the big questions for us today is, what does this mean for the future relationship between government and Congress? And of course, today we will certainly talk about the events of the past few days in Brasilia, which also have kept international interests, I think, in the whole world. But I don't want to anticipate our panelists. So the program of this discussion series has been put together by my colleague Bruno Speck, who is also here today from OSPI, and by myself. And we are very pleased to have succeeded in once more attracting some highly interesting colleagues from Brazil and from Europe as speakers for our events. Let me, before I'm going to introduce very shortly our two speakers for today, let me just give you some technical notes. First, I already mentioned that we are recording the event, and we are also streaming live on YouTube. And you are all very welcome to actively participate in our discussion. You can use the chat to formulate questions. You can raise your real hand in our discussion, or you, of course, can raise your digital hand in WebEx. And the idea of this discussion today is that we are going to start with about 15 minutes presentations of each one of our speakers. And then we have an open discussion, and well, everybody is invited to ask questions or to comment on what our speakers are going to present. We are going to start with Professor Dr. Mariana Llanos. Mariana holds a PhD in politics from University of Oxford, from the St. Anthony's College. She also has a licenciatura in political science from Universidade del Salvador in Buenos Aires. After this, she participated in the postgraduate program of the Social and Political History Institute of Instituto Torquato di Tella in Buenos Aires, Argentina. She's been working at an institute that today is called GIGA, Institute of Latin American Studies, but when she started there in 2001, it's still, the name was still Institut für Ibero-Amerikanisches. She has been working at GIGA as a researcher and already for a few years now. She is a lead research fellow at GIGA Institute of Latin American Studies, and since the summer term 2021, she is also an extraordinary professor for democratic institutions in the Global South at the University of Erfurt, as we have been talking about before. So this is where the German social democracy have his cuña. I don't know how this is in English. But they're working in a project on democratic institutions in the Global South. She's also editor-in-chief of the Journal of Politics in Latin America, edited by GIGA. Her research is basically on political institutions in Latin America, presidentialism, Latin American congresses, courts, President-Congress relations, President-Court relations. And our second speaker today is Fernando Limongi. Fernando holds a PhD in political science from the University of Chicago. He was a professor in the Department of Political Science at University of São Paulo until 2018, and he is currently a professor at the São Paulo School of Economics at Fundação Getúlio Vargas. It's not necessary, or it wouldn't be necessary to talk too much about Fernando, because he's well known internationally for his books on democracy and development, co-authored with Michael Alvarez, José Antonio Chebub, and Adam Przeworski, and also his books on executive and legislative and the new constitutional order, and budget policy and coalition presidentialism, both co-authored with Argelina Figueiredo. His research includes the study of political regimes, elections, the relations between powers, and he's published in a lot of different journals worldwide on elections, political regimes, and relations among powers. So it's really a pleasure to have you both here today with us. I couldn't imagine better speakers for our today's issue. And so thank you very much once more. And we are going to start with Mariana. And Mariana, it's up to you now. And I think you told me that you are going to share a presentation. So go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. That was a very, very nice introduction. And I'm very thankful for Bruno as well for having invited me to be part of this series, and also to share this panel with Fernando Limongi. It's an honor to be with all of you talking about government and Congress in Brazil. I was a little bit hesitating how I would focus my presentation, but then I decided I wanted to talk a little bit about impeachment in the Bolsonaro years, and actually these are mainly ideas. This is still not a paper, but I would like to write a paper with my PhD student Cheyenne Maya, and I thought she would be present, but she's not still here. But anyway, what we are going to present here are some ideas in the process of elaboration. So I'm very much looking forward to your comments and suggestions. Why this topic? Maybe this is starting from the end, but you may know that I have worked before on impeachments, and Brazil has also been a very dear case for me, and I have always been curious about that. What you see there in the table on the left side on impeachments request, the number of impeachment requests. This is a data that is always mentioned in the press in Brazil all over the years, in Scholar to Bolsonaro. You see those articles in the press, or tantos pedidos de impeachment contra o presidente. And then I knew that Bolsonaro was kind of the outlier there because we thought until Dilma was the president had got most pedidos de impeachment of all the presidents since redemocratization, but Bolsonaro kind of doubled that number. And we might say, okay, we are not surprised about that. We know who Bolsonaro is, and after the events of last Sunday, it's very clear, very illustrative of the kind of people he is and the people who are with him. But still, it was little bit surprising to see that 50% of those pedidos impeachments, or almost 50%, were of such a long period were against President Bolsonaro. So the little bit research question would be, why so many impeachment request and why no impeachment in the end. And there I present you a table as well, which is kind of the theoretical puzzle as well, that when we work on impeachments, and which is a forthcoming article I wrote with my co-author Leif Mastenredet in the University of Bergen, where we try to show that the impeachment is the constitutional instruments we have to render presidents accountable in fixed terms systems, on presidential systems in between elections. But of course, this is not a perfect kind of instrument. It has a lot of inconveniences or dilemmas, as we call them. Above all, it's very difficult because the constitutions are not very precise on what is actually an impeachable offense, and it's very difficult to define one. And also because this is, of course, a political instrument, not only a legal instrument, it's also a political instrument, because the deciding organism in the end is the Chamber of Deputies and the Senate, so the Congress. So I think it's a way to approach government legislative relations. It has been very important in Brazil. We have had actual cases of impeachments. We have had votes that fail in the chamber. And so Bolsonaro would have to worry about his situation in the Congress sooner or later, as will have presidents in the future in Brazil as well. And I mentioned there, I noted in red type error 2, because this is how we call these errors when impeachment is not working as thought in the Constitution. We could say in practice we have a lot of problems, and we take actually the Bolsonaro case as an extreme example, extreme case to exemplify this kind of errors. When we think it should be undisputable in Bolsonaro's case that the president had committed impeachable offenses, but however, no impeachment took place in practice. So this is more or less the context, and also this is also a context in an article I wrote with Aníbal Pérez-Liñán. It was published 2 years ago, Legislative Studies Quarterly, where we analyze these impeachment resolutions or requests a long time, and we see that not only legislators are entitled to present such requests, but also citizens. So it's something, it's an instrument that's also used by citizens, and in the end we analyze why good legislators care in presenting so many if they know that those requests are not gonna be successful. It's just one is successful, why should we present 145? And we analyzed that question in that article, and we know after our research that these requests not only are requesting the presidential dismissal from power, but are also expressing or representing the anger or the indignation of the citizens against unpopular presidents. And there, so we stop with Temer, but now we have Bolsonaro, and we can add a little bit on what happened with him. And it's very important to know that, of course, the president needs at least 1/3 of the legislators to avoid the formation of an impeachment majority against him. So he has to work somehow with Congress. And then the president needs to have the support, and this is a Brazilian characteristic of the Speaker of the House, because this person is the gatekeeper that decides whether to authorize the formation of the special committee to investigate the charges. So it's very difficult for a Brazilian president not to have this communication with Congress. And I'm not gonna go there very deeply, because we know who Bolsonaro is. We know that he came in power in with a profound crisis of representation. He didn't want to. He was presented himself as the anti-establishment candidate, and there is that very nice article in the book of the series by Fernando and others, analyzing how he built his government without without wanting to invite parties into the formation of a coalition presidentialism that was so important to stabilize presidentialism in Brazil after democratization. And then we know about his ideology, his controversial agenda of undoing things of the past, and I noted in Roth that there was a lot in him that could lead to a potential abuse of power or against the constitution. It could be considered a crime against the constitution. But when the burst of the pandemic occurred in March 2020, I would say the pandemic was a catalyst when all those items or positions that I wrote over there became really clear. And Bolsonaro made these international headlines because of his negacionista and anti-scientific approach to the pandemic, and because his strategy of facing the pandemic was not managing the pandemic, but deepening the social polarization and the incendiary rhetoric against democratic institutions, Congress, judicial, local governments. Everyone who contradicted his views was a target there. So in that case, when the pandemic came, he kind of actualized or make it very clear in concrete terms what that far right ideology was and his stance against the institutions were. And it was there that, so we had not seen coalition incentives before because he was against the system, we could say, the establishment, but he had somehow his own personal interests or strong interest in protecting his personal issues or his family interest, and of course in surviving in power. So the seed was there, and was kind of evident when the pandemic burst in March, and that we see with the presentation of impeachment requests against the president in time. This is a monthly count of those impeachments, and we see when the pandemic starts in March 2020, the request jump. There were just a few before. And then, and it would be, I haven't had the time to analyze those data, but it's interesting, would be interesting to see how many of those were from citizens. I think many of them come from citizens and just a few from legislators. But anyway, this is for further work. There is another jump there when you see at the beginning of 2021, when the pandemic had a year already and the death toll had reached more like 200,000 people, and there were a succession of scandals. You know very well that that was related to, especially to the shortage of oxygen and the surge of deaths in Manaus, you may remember, and those facts closely pointed to the president and the minister's error. So many of those requests have as topics the behavior of the president, the responsibility of the president in relation to the pandemic, and of course, in connection, his attacks to democratic institutions. So after this, the president had to do something because he got all those investigations by the Federal Supreme Tribunal, and also all those requests of impeachments. And he didn't change at all his views on the pandemic, but he understood that he needed to break some alliances. And that is something that we see immediately afterwards. this moving to articulate with the Central using the instruments that the system gives to the presidency to build this kind of support with Congress. And I don't have to explain what the Central is. I think everyone knows, but it's an important kind of base of support, around 200 deputies in the chamber, which would give him the possibility of breaking any alliance, impeachment alliance against him. And these parties are very ideological in the right, but mostly eager of getting privileges and advantages from the presidency. So he broke that kind of alliance by giving the presidency of the Chamber of Deputies to one of those, Artur Lira, and that was very important because, as I said, this is the gatekeeper to opening a process of impeachment. And then also by using the reaccommodation of personnel in the recreation of ministries to make room for the Central in the cabinet. So the graph shows that the number of changes of ministers also increases, particularly in March 2021, 1 month after Artur Lira begins his mandate as a president of the Chamber of Deputies. And then, of course, there was the other thing that that's the controversial creation of the orçamento secreto, the secret budget, a system of amendments to the budget without any transparency and given to the discretionary allocation by the committees, budget committees chairs. So, and also that begins around the date of Lira's appointment as the chair or as the president of the Chamber of Deputies. So this is more or less the picture I wanted to present you. I have to analyze all that and you have to help me. So I'm moving now to the conclusions, and I have some questions. I would like to hear also your reactions. The first thing I wonder is, what are the systemic, if we can call it like this, costs of Bolsonaro's impeachment survival? So I think Fernando is the expert here to analyze the relations, the status of the presidency in relation to Congress, and it's very controversial that kind of Bolsonaro surrender initially all those powers, amazing powers of the presidency of Brazil, and this was cut by all those obscure characters in the Chamber of Deputies with the use of the power to allocate resources so controversially. So I wonder what that this means for the future. We know that Bolsonaro, this may be leadership contingent. I mean, if we have Lula in the presidency, it will make a great difference to have an expert and experienced and skilled leader as President Lula will change a lot of things, but there are some things that we might not be seen, and that will impact on these systemic relations between the presidency and Congress. And the other things is what were the costs for democracy? This is what we were more like worried when we were writing that paper on what happens when you don't impeach a president that has to be impeached. So my type error too. And this dialogues a lot with the literature on democratic backsliding that is kind of dominant at the moment, and when we study democratization and autocratization, and of course we could have saved lives if we hadn't had Bolsonaro for so long, but we could also have saved democracy in some ways, although in the end, of course, we could say it was a nice story that the voters stopped this president from getting reelected. Or another related question is whether the impeachment threats did play a role being taming Bolsonaro or obliging the president to enter in this dialogue that he didn't want to have with Congress. So it's very difficult to retrospectively to have a positive view on those years, but I don't know, I'm trying to here just to present some kind of ideas for the discussion. And so thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to Fernando first and then your comments.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Mariana. And I would like to just hand over to Fernando. Fernando, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you, Peter and Bruno, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with Mariana, my old friend. I'm very happy to be able to participate of this discussion. Well, I have no formal presentation. I will only put on the table some points for discussion. I am as lost as anyone else about what's going on in Brazil and what can happen here. So I took the title of the session as the guideline, and I thought try to reason about the results of the election and its impacts. And of course, when we are talking about impacts, we are thinking also of what happened last Sunday. It's very difficult to separate the things and to try to not be taken by what is going on. So let's try to organize the debate around these topics. So the first point I would like to make is that there was a mismatch between the outcome of the elections for the legislative, for the House, for the Senate, and even for governorships and the presidential election. In what sense? In the sense that the right won most cities on the House and in the Senate, and also that most governors from the big states, the most rich states, fell in the hands of Bolsonaristas or whoever was on the side of Bolsonaro. That's true for Minas Gerais, for São Paulo, for Rio de Janeiro, for Paraná. So there is one aspect in which the opposition to the Lula government, given that Lula won the presidency, the opposition did very well in the elections and did surprisingly well, unexpectedly well, and conquered a lot of seats in the House, in the Senate, and governorship. So that's important, or that was important for thinking about the impacts and the possible ways that the Lula government was going to work or is going to work, right? Because it all indicated that would face very strong opposition and a strong right-wing opposition. That was true up to the point in which Bolsonaro withdrew from the public arena. And then afterwards, he flew to the United States. And now we had this event of last Sunday. So it seems that the opposition has no leadership and has no guideline to behave or doesn't know how to behave as an opposition. So this is a factor that we have to take into account, but that is, it's a question mark because we are being surprised by Bolsonaro and the Bolsonarismo all the time. We don't understand it very well. We don't understand how it works, how it survives, and how it gets votes. Gets a lot of votes. And we are always thinking, well, this time these guys are going. They showed that it's enough. They made the mistake that will kill them. And they never died. And they are not, he was not impeached. Everybody would say, this guy will be impeached. All the time we were kind of considering this. He survived. The beginning of the election, everybody was betting that he would be defeated, easily defeated, and it was not what happened. So, so we have this uncertainty here that what's going on, what will be the opposition, or how the opposition will behave, and well, so this is the first point I would like to stress, that Lula won, but it was a very tight victory and with a lot of defeats and with a Congress that is more right-wing than any other before. So it's more difficult for Lula. That's one. So there is a strong mismatch between the legislative outcome and the executive outcome. Majoritarian election, but this mismatch is supposed to happen with multi-party presidentialism. So presidents never get the majority. So then the second aspect is coalition making. Every Brazilian president that is normal, that behaves according to expectations, forms a coalition and has to attract some of parties that were not with him in the election or that or minority or were with him in the election but are not his party to form a coalition. So that's the normal stuff. So Lula will have to do it. And it has a scenario that is not very good because his party is small, relatively small. The support for him is relatively small. And there is a lot of right-wing guys in there. But that's manageable. That is the way things work. That's the normal stuff. If you were to organize that and think about this scenario, we would say there are parties or groups that we can say these will be part of the government for sure. Okay, so like PT, PCdoB, PSOL, left-wing parties, and some of the center parties like PMDB, they will join, no problem. That's easy to handle, that's the way it works, that's the way it is. So we have this group. And on the other side, you have the group that you know you will not attract. The opposition, the hardcore opposition. But in this case, given that is the Bolsonarismo and not the parties that are working, and Bolsonaro is this question mark, this group is not easily defined. But in the past, we had that. So for instance, during the Fernando Henrique administration, the left was the opposition, led by PT. And PT organized a small group with PDT, PSB, was the hardcore opposition that was betting on being government in the next round. During the Lula administration and in first mandate of Dilma, you had the bloc, the opposition was PSDB, and the PFL then renamed it as DEM. So you knew who or which groups were in the opposition. And these groups in the opposition during the PT government held governorships in strong states like São Paulo, Minas Gerais for a while. So they had ways to survive. They had this long-term expectation of returning to the government, and at the same time, they had some bases or some resources in key states. So São Paulo was very important for PSDB because then its leadership could grow, could get resources from the state, from entrepreneurs, and to campaign against PT. Well, this group, so this was during the Fernando Henrique administration and during the PT administration. During the Bolsonaro administration, it was not as clear who would be running afterwards against Bolsonaro, or it was clear that PT would, but it was not clear what PSDB and them would do, which side they would take. So they were unable to behave as an opposition to Bolsonaro. And that they had already had lots of problems during the Temer administration, so these parties disappeared, right? They are gone. So that means that what was left of the right, what remained there as right, was the Bolsonarismo only. But in the House, there is a middle group. So there are those that are certain to be with PT and with Lula. There are those that we would bet that are the opposition. PL, the party from Bolsonaro, that would hang around Bolsonaro and to bet for the next presidential election and wait and use its connections with governorships to survive. Given that PL was formed, or that Bolsonaro came to PL late, a group of members of PL is attractable by the government. We knew that. So there is a group that is clear, PT can attract. There's this middle and this right that will bet for the next election. But so we don't know from the clear group, the group that will join the government to the right. It's very undefined at this time, much more than any other election. After any other election, you always knew these groups will come to the government, this group will be with the opposition. This time, it's really hard to know where you will draw the lines. And with the events of this last Sunday, I think that these lines kind of blurred much more. And why is it important to discuss how strong is the opposition and how tight and how viable the opposition is for the next round? Because I think I'm trying to think about it, like this group, this stronghold or die-hard Bolsonaristas or the opposition that can think that they may return to the government in 2026, they could provide support for the group that Mariana identified, the Centrão, and the leader kind of people that controlled a part of the government machine through the budget, through the secret budget. So one of the big questions was, will Lula be able to bring this group to the government and to make them behave in a civilized way and reconstruct the controls that the executive used to have over these resources? So this group could use the right wing, the strong right wing, to resist Lula and to not go to the government. So this, I think, with the bad step that these guys took this Sunday, I think that weakened a bit or a lot Lira and the Central. Lula will be able to attract more people than he has attracted so far. So I'm but always remembering that we never understood and had any bet that worked with Bolsonarismo, right? We always thought, oh, this time they did it, they killed themselves and they survived. They are so. If we look to the composition of the government or the coalition that is already formed with this distribution of portfolios, blah, 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 it's not even a minimal winning coalition. It's Lula has 51% of the House today, if we are to be doing the math and seats and ministries and the distribution. So it's tight, right? And in the Senate is 44%. So not even a majority. So it's clear that Lula will have to expand his coalition. And this is, but in this respect, this is not very different than Collor, Fernando Henrique first government, and Lula first government. Always the first government starts with a very tight coalition. There is maybe a miscalculation, maybe something that is very hard right after the election to not give to your party too much portfolios, and or to cross the line and bring people that were campaigning against you in the next day to the government. So it takes a while. It takes a while to broaden the coalition and to gain more secure, so to speak, and a majority. So what we have now, it's a very, very tight or even not a majoritarian coalition. It's not a minoritarian government because it's 51% in the House, but it's 44% in the Senate. So it's minoritarian. There is some parties will receive second rank positions that are already on being negotiated, but that means that Lula will have to manage to attract more parties, negotiate, make concessions. And I think that the way things are going after last Sunday, that work is a little bit more, it's easier now that if we had this meeting a week from now, I would say, well, it's tough, but it will go. Give time and things will find the right place. Now it seems that is easier, but always with this remark. We always subestimate Bolsonaro and don't understand their moves, and always being surprised by its capacity to react and survive. But who knows? So I think that's all that I have, that I want to say, or I can say in public now. And I think that it's better for us to open the floor and discuss this openly and without any pretension to know what's going on, because we are lost. We don't understand what's going on. These guys are crazy, too crazy for us, for our rational minds to understand what is going on. And I've been defeated by them all the time. So let's see. Thank you very much. I hope this has been, that I have added something, or that I have contributed something for the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Fernando. I would like to start, inviting once more everybody to join the discussion. As I said before, you can use the chat to ask questions, or you can also raise your real hand or your digital hand. I would like to start with a comment on what Fernando has been saying about the mismatch. Yes, you're totally right. but imagine if there hadn't been this mismatch, but a Bolsonaro victory in the presidential election. So how easy would it have been for him, no, to continue to destroy Brazilian democracy? So I think we have to be very happy with this kind of mismatch we are living now. And I have two questions for you, Fernando. The first one would be, how do you what has been Lula's strategy so far with regard to coalition making? You said that at this moment he has about 51% in the House and 44% in the Senate. This is, well, in the Senate, not even a majority, as you said, and a very small majority in the House. And as we know, you need for political changes in Brazil, you need more than 50%. Very often you need about 2/3, no? Because a lot of policies are are part of the constitution, and so in some way you have to make constitutional changes to change policies, and so I would like to ask well, you, but of course also Mariana, how do you see his strategies? He is a well-known and very experienced coalition builder. He has managed this in his first two governments. So what is his strategy now in coalition building? And the other question I have is with regard to policies. So what will be his priorities in policy making? As Mariana has said, the main strategy of Bolsonaro has been a strategy of undoing. So I'm asking myself whether Lula's strategy now is some kind of redoing former, well, it's not only PT policies, because the strategy of Bolsonaro has not been only to undo PT policies, but also Fernando Henrique policies, no? And so I'm asking myself whether, what is his strategy of redoing some of these policies? What will be very difficult, because he needs the congressional majorities, and as you have been saying, Fernando, this is the Congress, the most far-right Congress Brazil has ever had. And so you can, if you manage to maintain at least the majorities or minorities necessary and not to suffer impeachment, no? As Dilma hasn't been able to, and Bolsonaro has been able to at least have this kind of support, but this doesn't mean that you are able to really to make policy, no? So these would be my two questions just to start our discussion. I don't know, Mariana, would you like to start, or Fernando? How, Fernando, would you like? Then Fernando, she would like you to start.
Well, see, you're totally right, and Mariana is totally right that most of Bolsonaro policies were undoing or were destroying what was done after the redemocratization. So in this sense, the continuity between the governments of PSDB and PT. And so this was very clear that after Bolsonaro victory, that we had this continuity in this period, and that there was an undoing of all these progresses, and that in the end, the two parties were not that opposed, in policy making, as we would say they are, other than at least in the rhetorical part of the and in macroeconomic policies, say. But what was surprising for me, and I think that for maybe for everybody, was that this was not enough to build an anti-Bolsonaro coalition during the election. And so to speak, that the right and what was left, the civilized right and the civilized center did not adhere or did not join Lula. Even after Lula brought Alckmin for his vice presidency, the movement in this moment was kind of, that killed. The election is done. The center right will, the center left will join, the civilized part of this country will join forces, and we will restart this continuity between, yes, the BPT, restarted everything, then we can fight again. After we rebuild. But that did not happen. And the civilized center attacks the left for that. But I think that they should recognize their mistakes, or don't they? So the insistence of having a third way, it was politically wrong. And we saw that last Sunday. We needed our front, strong coalition against these guys. And this did not happen. In this regard, mostly because of the so-called market, or the opposition to economic policies from PT, that PT is populist, that PT is fiscally irresponsible, blah, 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 blah. Well, PT started the government now, and Lula discourse went to this also because the center did not want to embrace him and kind of started to do opposition to him. It was easy to buy Lula with this discourse, and they did not want to. So I'm just trying to turn things around, because in the public sphere here, or in the debate, or at least in debates that I am in, because now I am at FGV and the economists, blah, 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 they keep saying, well, PTs, well, you saw PT with Haddad as the Minister of Finance, blah, blah, blah. They are saying that they will spend, that they have to look to the poor, blah, blah, and they will not respect fiscal responsibility. Well, they ended up doing this discourse because they were left. They were left without support from the center, that the center tried to put money, everything on Simone Tebet, and didn't, and you would talk to them saying, there is no way Simone Tebet will get more than 5% of the votes. No, she's growing, she will. So there wasn't totally blind for the reality that the right was captured by this uncivilized people that stormed Congress, Supreme Court, and that's coming. Since Dilma's second government, since the re-election of Dilma, this is coming. These guys are there, and the right, PSDB, Aécio, that supported the call of fraud in the elections in 2014. So there is a history. So what I'm saying is that, and this may be wishful thinking, is that now, after that Sunday, maybe the civilized people will sit, talk, and understand what is going on and find a way of constructing this rebuilding coalition policy. That may be wishful thinking, and probably is. But the fact is that electorally, there is only Lula and Bolsonaro now. There's nothing else. So there is reconstruction to do for everybody, because Lula is an old guy, right? He's saying he will not run anymore, and I bet he is kind of tired, and he will be tired after 4 years in the government. So we need new leadership, and we have to have time to reconstruct the country. That's what is mostly important right now. So that's it.
Thank you, Fernando. Mariana?
Very shortly, I think, because Fernando has these views of the insider. I don't. But the first thing I thought when you mentioned the shortage of supports in the House and in the Senate is, well, when I began to study political science in the 80s, it was Argentina was President Alfonsín after the transition, trying to stabilize the country after this severe dictatorship with just the support of a majority in the chamber, and the Senate was the problem, right? So maybe Brazil is now more to the comparative standards. I remember my Brazilian colleagues always wanted to work on the Congress and measure only what was happening in the chamber. Now is the moment to add the Senate as an important player now, right? On the other hand, so that's maybe, on the other hand, I think it's doable, a majority. I want to think, as you said, Fernando, that this middle ground kind of undefined, so they are in the right, those parties, but they are more pragmatic than other things. So if the president's still the institution that used to be still there, and the president knows how to use the instruments that the presidency has, he should be able to handle that kind of center, so as more malleable than the ideological extreme. I agree on that, but I see that that center present. So and of course it's the institution, but it's also the leader, and well, Lula is the leader to be in this situation, I think. Of course, I also have angst, fear, in the sense that Lula is an old leader. I always worried what would happen in the scenario that Lula is not there. What would Alkim do? But that's the way it is, and well, after the events on Sunday, it's very well, I'm not sure how to think about that, if this is positive or negative. Maybe it's positive, as you said, because it became very clear. I was looking for opinion polls. Maybe there are not so many, like what's the impression, or maybe you know the others in Brazil, how has the public opinion reacted to those events, and I was wondering if they finally see what it means to bring the extreme to the extreme, and maybe that's a good thing for everyone. But we had to come to that extreme to realize what that means. But that's another arena, I think. In the end, well, when we analyze those presidential breakdowns, we put the two kind of labels, right? The institutional and the street level. And if the president manages one, it doesn't mean that it will manage the other one. And if both of them go against the president, it's a problem. But well, I hope it was, I'm not sure that it was the last one on Sunday that something like that will occur. I hope it is, but let's see how the streets develop and what influence they will have on the institutional level. So I'm thinking loudly, so I don't stop there.
Thank you, Mariana. Before handing over first to Claudia and then to Bruno for their questions, I would only like to take one thing you just mentioned, what could happen in case Alkin had to act as a president. We all hope that this will not be necessary, but I wouldn't be so pessimistic, at least after having followed the speech he presented when he was presented as the vice presidential candidate. There he really offered a narrative that was very much in line with reconstructing democracy, and so I think he understands what has to be done. But let's hope that Lula will have these 4 years for his kind of reconstruction work. In my list, there first appears Claudia with her raised hand, and then Bruno. So Claudia, it's up to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the inputs. My question is on Bolsonarismo. You used the term Bolsonarismo. I use it too. But my question is what kind of political animal it is. Because when we talk about, let's compare with Chavismo, we had a member of the military who created a new party and changed the constitution. When we talk about Peronismo, we had a member of the military who created a new party and changed the constitution. And so my question is, what are the chances of consolidation of Bolsonarismo? Can we talk, is a sort of social or political movement, or is this a question of numbers, of a lot of votes divided into into many different groups? I don't see, or if we talk about Trumpism, he didn't create a new party, but the Republicans are backing Trump. So I don't see the columns supporting Bolsonaro in the sense of a political movement that can develop. I think without ideological parties that joined behind a political leader or parties that are newly created, it is difficult to see a political movement with future. And my question is, how many people are those who are ready to attack the political institutions within Bolsonarismo? I mean, the anti-systemic people are all those we have seen on the screen, or besides the military, some parts of the military. What is the base of Bolsonarismo, and what kind of political animal do you think it is? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claudia. And I would propose to take Bruno's question and then hand over back to Fernando and Mariana. Bruno.
Perfect. I would like to add to Claudia's comment. We have seen, we could say we always missed the point of Bolsonaro, and we were always wrong, but I would give it a try and try again to try to understand what he did right, what he stands for, and what he, in the perspective of what political science says, still misses. So I think based on your presentation last time, 2 years ago, Fernando, you basically said, well, Bolsonaro did not go through the normal pattern of interaction with Congress. He tried to govern as an anti-system president. And then he basically 2 years later, or for the second half of his presidency, he turned around and he found a way to deal with Congress, maybe in an inefficient way in terms of putting into place his public policies, but in a very efficient way in avoiding impeachment. So he learned something about how the system works, even maybe not in the way we saw it in the past. Now, concerning a second aspect of how politics work through political parties, we could also say that he has not learned how to capitalize on his votes and translate his votes into a strong party base. The first time he built a party from scratch, or not from scratch, but he made a party jump from close to 0 to 10% of the votes. Then he lost control of that party and stayed without a party for a year or something like that. Then he joined a second party, and he did it again from scratch. He made this party jump from 0 to 10% of the vote. Coming back to Claudia's comment, I think a decisive point will be if he goes through a learning effect in terms of the importance of controlling a party, and this time struggles or fails again in controlling this party and making this party the vehicle for his future ambition. I cannot see this right now, and looking at the past, I would be very reluctant to say that he will be able to control the Liberal Party, the PL, given the fact that it is now controlled by a very powerful politician who, Bivar, I didn't know Bivar, but Bivar, as an unknown figure, was able to take control back from a party Bolsonaro was trying to take. Now, what's his name?
Valdemar Costa Neto.
Valdemar Costa Neto. He is a very experienced politician. He kept hold of the party while he was in prison. So I doubt that even if Bolsonaro realizes that he needs to control the party and fights for the party, he will be able to take this party from Valdemar Costa Neto, who is more inclined to use these 10%, the biggest party, use this 10% of seats to join the Centrão. So that's my long comment in elaborating on basically on what Claudia said. And my second comment and question would be to Mariana. I wonder, in your spreadsheet with 2 entries, now you have this one entry, success and failure of impeachment, and the second entry, an impeachable offense or not. I wonder how you will operationalize, or how you will make the distinction? And why don't you substitute the second dimension simply with a dimension of political support or not? Because that's how we know how to operationalize what means political support, but it's very difficult to make the distinction between what would be an impeachable offense and not, because that's an endless legal debate. So yeah, maybe you'll just elaborate on that, how you think you can make that distinction. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bruno. Thank you, Claudia. We could start with Mariana, and then you don't like to start? Okay, so let's start with Fernando.
Okay, let me start for one point that Bruno made, but also Claudia made, but with regard to the parties. One of the difficulties of Lula is that some of the leaders of these parties burn the bridges behind them. Valdemar Costa Neto, Ciro Nogueira from PP, and União Brasil, they had, União Brasil attracted Moro. And they want to come, part of it wants to come to the government, but cannot. And now we don't have that flexibility of changing parties. As before, maybe we have, we don't know, but most likely something like that will happen. Lots of people will change parties to accommodate this mismatch. And I think that Ciro Nogueira will have a very hard time to come back, given what he said in there. But these guys can do what they are unbelievable. Valdemar Costa Neto seems to be betting that he can tame Bolsonaro and use Bolsonaro, and that they may play together in a symbiotic way or something like that, that you give me the votes and I handle the machine. If that will work or not, who knows? But it seems so far that has been his bet. I didn't hear him from Sunday to now. Valdemar disappeared. So most of these guys that were satellites or using Bolsonaro, they are waiting to see which side things go and then take their side. But PP, for instance, is very important because Lula is from PP. And Lula will be re-elected. And so the other things that I forgot to say is that besides Bolsonaro destruction of the normal structures of politics, policies, everything, he did that with Congress. When he decided not to build a coalition, he changed everything. And the type of agreement that he made with Lula was not a coalition. Was, you take this, I take that. I go to the Cercadinho, talk with people, scream, and you govern, or you take care of this kind of stuff. That was not coalition in the sense that we know. But that disorganized Congress, totally, or the way Congress used to. And we have pandemic also. Congress worked 2 years without presence, all through leaderships. So if we had already a Congress that was already two-party leaders centered, now we have that to the highest level, because they call each other and arrange everything. They don't need the deputies in there anymore, and they handle it. how many votes you have? Pop, goes. So the Congress is kind of a ghost now. And it has to start again to meet, to have meetings, everybody vote, has to be there to vote. Because now they can, there's during a roll call, you can vote from Dubai. And the guys are there in the plenary voting at the same time. That's a mess. No one knows what is going on. So the pandemic plus Bolsonaro was fatal to the lethal to Congress. So Congress has to start again, reboot, Control Del, begin again. And so it's a very strange situation. One comment about impeachment. Bolsonaro was all the time with this in his head. He chose the vice president with this in view. Remember that they said it was to be the prince, the successor of the Dom Pedro II grandson. And he said, no, this guy, no. This guy, if he comes up with the idea of being the president, he's an alternative. So I need someone that is just like me. Mourão was this guy. And then Mourão started to play by himself. He's like, and he said, no, another guy that is just like me. So he always played with this possibility, and he neutralized any possibility. Why you put Mourão instead of Bolsonaro? It's the same. It will not change. To conclude, regarding the political animal, of this expression, this is really a new animal that we don't know, that we don't understand, and that we are always using our training or our knowledge, the way things used to be, the things that the way we think they have to be, to apply to them and say, it's wrong. It won't work, but it works. So it's a new political animal. And in a different setup, the word changed. Yeah, and it changed several times, right? In the beginning of the elections, you had to control, parties or politicians had newspapers. Then they had radios, then TV, and things change. Now, with this social media and things like that, you have a different way of organizing and different way of doing politics, maybe. And that escapes from us in the sense, and it's a different way of mobilizing, getting support and everything. So far, Bolsonaro has been very, very good at getting votes. And given the policies that he adopted, the things that he did during the pandemic, how can you imagine that someone would vote for him after his behavior during the pandemic? And you have lots of physicians that are voting for him. Okay. And there are people saying now that everybody that was there on Sunday were from PT, that PT did that everything. Or that they are killing people in the barracks now. So it's a totally different reality that we are not used to. And I think that when mass parties began, the aristocrat could not understand the parties that were being constructed. So this is a new political animal that works and feeds himself in a totally different way that we are using. So that's why we are always saying, now it's dead. And like these villains in terror films, you kill them 10 times and they come from the water again and pick up your leg. And so Bolsonaro is this, he's there. And hope this time he really made a mistake or someone, but who knows?
But I mean, you're very pessimistic now about our capacity to preview anything about Bolsonaro. I'm not very experienced in coup d'etat, but
no, I had a column in Valor.
I know.
And I said all the time, this guy cannot win. I wrote several times that. And then other day, one guy said to me, oh, remember that meeting 2018, Washington, January, you said, no way Bolsonaro will win. So I said it several times that Bolsonaro doesn't exist. He will not be able to win. Maybe it's me, it's not political science, but as Claudia said, this is a totally different animal.
But the fact that things go wrong does not only surprise us political scientists, and is more or less why we do political science, to understand why things can go wrong. It also surprises leaders. So back to Bolsonaro right now. I think this Sunday events were the perfect moment for somebody to stick out his head and say, well, I support this, no? Because it more or less went into into nothing, or it had no concrete results, because nobody sticked out his head. Not even Bolsonaro, who is abroad, who wouldn't have any risk in supporting this, or in at least giving some positive feedback to this huge crowd that sacrificed itself. So,
but you see, when he didn't do the coup, his supporters were saying he's a strategist. He knows the moment that he has to move. That's why he's withdraw. And I have a wife that has the bad habit of following all these guys in all these groups. So I get all this information. Angela knows all these guys and follow them, and it's crazy. It's crazy. So they explain everything. Everything is. We can explain everything, right? And rationalize everything. They rationalize everything and invent lots of stuff. So it's true that there's a lot of fight or possibilities of guys that will pick Bolsonaro's place. Mourão tried before the day that he was the president. He made a speech in which he said, Bolsonaro betrayed us. I am here. He went to the United States. Look to me. But after Sunday, he kind of he tried to capitalize on that. He said, it's right. They should have done that. But it did not repercute. But everybody is waiting Bolsonaro move. How Bolsonaro will deal with that? He went to the hospital. That's the way he solves this problem. But who knows? I hope we are right that he's done. And I hope
I think
that
his
this
chance
was,
is to become a victim, to get victimized, coming back, being imprisoned. That's his only chance.
well, I don't
Then,
want
and
him, I prefer him not in prison, to
Hmm.
not to use this
yes, yeah,
as a political stuff. But truly, some of the guys that were related to him put the neck out of the sand, and you can cut them now. Like this guy, like the Ibanez, the Secretary of Security, these guys. So you can handle a little bit. And so that, in a sense, I think that it was good for the government to have this and to be able to now to repress. But who knows?
Yeah.
No, I was just thinking when hearing that if people were able to vote for Bolsonaro in these elections after the pandemic, we were thinking that the pandemic, as you said, was so enough information on the leader to avoid his comeback, but people voted for them. So why not to think that people will forget about Sunday or they will rewrite the story of Sunday again? So I was, if you look at, well, I don't follow those guys in Twitter, but I came across a tweet by Maurao yesterday where he said the poor thousand people who are arrested by the left without having done anything on Sunday. So this was just a little group, and now we see the left in action arresting unfairly all those people. So this narrative is coming now, and that's maybe why we can't really grasp these animals, new animals, not only Bolsonarismo, actually, I think is in other countries, is around the world, and how they rebuild the truth. So we saw those videos, and now they are running other videos where they show that the left was infiltrada in those kind of things, and that's the reason why things are happening, and so on. So we have like these moving kind of narratives, and that's the problem to grasp this phenomenon, how we deal with those parallel truths, and you believe what you want depending on the side you want to position yourself, and how do you work with that. I think that's the terrible thing about this, and social media. We haven't talked much about that, but it's another layer on the problems and the impact. And we as institutionalists, I consider myself one of those, have to learn how to deal with that, and what's the impact of that in institutional work in the end. So well, no, that's my thought when hearing to all of you. And I had a question to answer, Bruno, but maybe it's not out of the discussion. So, Fernando, you wanted to reply, or?
No, I just remember that there's the elephant in the room that we did not talk about it. That is the military.
Yeah, of course.
That's the elephant in the room, right? And that's also a big problem we have, because this crazy idea, this crazy right-wing ideas are there, and they are afraid of we going to communism again. So how come there's no communism in any in the world? So why this fear and this craziness about and the military is supported of Sunday, right?
Just as Mariana mentioned social media, I would like to once more come back to in some way to Claudia's question of how to understand Bolsonarismo. And I'm remembering Camila Rojas and her co-authors' interpretation of Bolsonarismo, and this is very much related to social media in the sense of the existence of a right-wing public sphere that uses a very aggressive rhetoric and is strongly based on political incorrectness, and all this hasn't disappeared. And I'm asking myself if this kind of interpretation is right, then is there a chance of Bolsonarismo without Bolsonaro? No, I don't know how you see this. Whether this kind of interpretation of Bolsonarismo takes the core of this movement, or and if this is the case, what might be the consequences? No, because the right-wing public sphere and all this continues to exist. We've seen this.
The only thing that I have to add to that is, well, the left will learn how to use that, and already in this election, the left in Brazil use it a lot. What was the name of the guy that helped Lula a lot? That
I don't remember.
Spread a lot of stuff. I found videos that Bolsonaro was in the Masonic meeting, and this is anathema for the evangelicals. So that was used also by the other side. So I think that it's true that the public sphere is changing. Clearly, it's changing with social media, and it's changing happily and accommodate to that. And politicians are learning how to use that, and some use better than others. And we also have to remember that the first one to make a very good use of social media was the American president,
Obama.
Obama won using Facebook. Now it's already a defunct Facebook. No one uses it anymore. He was very good on that, and he did very well in the first election, his first election, because of that. So it can be used several ways and different ways, but it's different. It's totally different.
Okay. Are there more questions or comments from our public?
Maybe I say something.
Yeah, Mariana, go ahead.
No, because Bruno made that question on my table. So I think I have to send you the paper to understand. But actually, is the two dimensions of impeachment. One is, you say, approve or not approve, is the majorities are there somehow. And the other is dimension is the reason why you should impeach. And both things are you can measure, you can see if the president has the majorities or not, but these are also kind of being constructed on the way. So it's not easy to see in advance. The president can manipulate those, as we saw with Bolsonaro. And then the other thing is really difficult, these crimes, how you define a crime. Even in Brazil, I think has the most detailed kind of impeachment law, but it doesn't help much, right? Because there is always controversy. Is really that an impeachable offense or is it not? So that's the difficult thing with impeachment. But we thought in that paper that there were that Bolsonaro, because of this extreme kind of, he's an extreme character, right? And with his far right views and his abuse of, and his kind of stance against the constitution, really clear that he was a good example, uncontroversial example of these impeachable offenses, while all the others are far away and we can discuss about them. In the case of Bolsonaro, we thought it is clear that, and we take as the opposite case the lot of impeachments that were at the same time occurring in Peru, where it's very debatable how those presidents were dismissed on grounds of corruption, but not really. It's not clear that were offenses against the Constitution, right? And I don't know, I would like to read Fernando's book on Dilma, but it was very controversial that Dilma was impeachable. Impeachment offense was against, was very clear. So yeah, so we took cases that are real extreme cases where you don't discuss about that, but on the rest of the impeachment world, here in the United States and anywhere, it's very debatable. So it's a very controversial kind of mechanism, but in the end, we think is what we have, right? And getting rid of impeachment is very complicated stuff. So we discuss a little bit that, what the alternatives could be, and there are not many good options out there. So we have to learn how to live with impeachment and try to make people aware that that's an instrument that can cause a lot of controversy, but can also solve problems when well used. So that was a bit out of the blue, but I felt I had to answer that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mariana. Yeah, and I think it's always necessary to keep in mind what you have been saying during your presentation, that impeachment is not just a legal procedure, but it's a political instrument. And so there are these two components, no, of any impeachment process. We are running out of time. Thanks a lot, Mariana, Fernando, for your presentations, all of you for your questions and comments. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week for our next round on government and judiciary. And then in 2 weeks, we are going to talk about international relations, foreign policy. Thank you very much. And if you would like to see the what we have been discussing today, you are invited to direct to our YouTube channel, where you can find the recordings of the first 3 sessions, and where you also will be able to find today's recordings. So thanks a lot. See you soon, and bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.